Hey, what's new and exciting? It's Kevin O'Shaughnessy here, and today I've got a different kind of video for you. A few years ago, I did a 4-part series on the major scale, so I thought I'd compile all the best bits from those videos so you could have it all in one place. In this video, I cover the formula for the major scale, how to apply that formula along one string, the names of all the notes in the 12 major scales, using the scale to learn the fretboard, linear scale fingerings, lateral scale fingerings, diagonal scale fingerings, and how to move from one set of fingerings to another. This is a bit of a longer video, but it's almost everything you need to know about major scales on the guitar. If you go through the exercises in this video, not only will you learn all your major scales, but you will demystify the fretboard forever. Now, before we jump in, I do want to point out that none of these exercises should hurt when you play them. If you feel pain in your wrist, your back, or your neck, it could be the way you're sitting with the guitar. It may not have occurred to you to look into this, especially if you're self-taught, but fixing your ergonomics can make everything easier on the guitar. Over my years of teaching, I've seen method books get this so wrong. So I created a free PDF to help you out with that. The link is in the description below. So let's get on with the video. So the major scale is probably one of the biggest building blocks in our system of music. And before we can get to playing it, I'm going to give you a very simple formula. We need a couple of building blocks here. So first thing you need to understand is the concept of whole steps and half steps. Now, this is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. A half step is simply the distance of one fret to the next. So if I go to the first fret and I play that, and I play the second fret, right? Those two notes are a half step apart, or you might have heard the term semitone. And a whole step, as you might imagine, is 2 frets apart. First fret to third fret, okay? So half steps, whole steps, or semitones and semitones and whole tones, okay? I like half steps and whole steps. It's a little easier for me to grab onto, but whatever vocabulary works for you. So our major scale is made up of a very simple formula. From any note that you start on, you can start on any fret here on the guitar. You take that note and you move up a whole step, then another whole step, then a half step. So 2 whole steps and a half step, and then you go 3 whole steps. So whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So it's going to look like this. We've got, here's our starting note. I'm on the first fret of the second string. So from here, I move up a whole step, another whole step. Here's my half step, another whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Okay? And that's the major scale, right? We probably know this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Right? You might have learned that in, elementary school music class or something like that. So we've got a formula. Doesn't make any difference what fret you're on, right? I can start here. Same scale. So what we've got is a formula for the major scale that we can use all over the neck. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that formula and we're going to start adding note names to it, okay? And we use letters to label all our notes, okay? Our musical alphabet is actually pretty simple. We've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then the whole cycle starts all over again. What we're going to do is we're going to start again here, first fret, second string. This note right here is C. And that's how I'm going to start referring to it for the rest of the video. This is C. We're going to start using letter names instead of fret numbers, okay? We know the formula. 2 whole steps and a half step, followed by 3 whole steps and a half step. And we're going to use that, and I'm going to show you how to apply these letter names to each one of the scales that we learned today so that you can start to get to know the names of the notes on the guitar. I'm going to take a quick aside right here, just in case you guys are wondering why we use letter names for the notes. Well, this is why. It has to do with how those notes are related to each other, how the frequencies of those notes are related to each other. So let me go back here to the high E string. If I go up to the 5th fret, what I have is an A. Specifically, what I have is A440, which you might notice as being the tuning reference for our whole system of music, right? Well, what that means is that this string is vibrating 440 times each second to generate this pitch. Now, if I go down an octave and I play this A here on the G string at the 2nd fret, this one is vibrating at 220 hertz. Right? So you see I cut the frequency number in half, and that gives me the next lowest octave. If I cut it in half again, I get the pitch of the low A on the guitar. Right? So there's A, that's 110 hertz. And if I take that another octave lower, that gives me the low A string on the bass guitar, and that rumbles at about 55 hertz. Okay, so you see every time we go down, we cut the frequency in half. So as you might expect, if I'm up here and I go up an octave, that's going to be 880 hertz. Okay, so that relationship, that 2-to-1 relationship between the high note and the low note in the octave is what creates this pitch class that we call A. And every pitch ever on any instrument, whether it's the guitar, the piano, whatever, all of their pitches work that way. So they all have this one pitch class. So in the case of the 3 notes per string fingering, right, we'll cover this in just a second, but we've got C, here's the C an octave up, and here's another C an octave up. And if I really want to go so far, here's another C an octave up, right? So those are all C's because the higher notes to the lower notes always have this 2-to-1 relationship. This is vibrating twice as fast as this one, which is vibrating twice as fast as this one, which is vibrating twice as fast as this one. So I hope that all makes sense. So let's get back to the scale. Let's start here. We've got C. We go up 1 whole step to D. The next whole step is E. Then we've got F, which is a half step away. G is a whole step. And now we've reached the end of our musical alphabet. We've got A as the next whole step to B, then C. Okay, we're back to the beginning. So we've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay. Now, this video here is going to be part of a series. So here's a finger pattern that I want you to work on. You don't need to build this up to any kind of speed, but use these fingers. You're going to use your first finger, second finger, fourth finger. Okay? Now you're going to kind of walk over here. You're going to do the same thing. First, second, fourth, and then first and second. Later on in the series, this will make a lot of sense. Okay? So we've got 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. And we can go backwards. We're going to go 2, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2, 1. Now it's probably a little bit of a stretch to do that, but you'll notice that as I'm playing, I lift my fingers up as I switch notes. So I switch the note. I don't hold a finger down. So that's what relieves the stretch as you go along. Switch, switch. And notice my first finger is already moving towards the next position. That's how I'm going to get the fluid, that's how I'm going to get the fluency, the fluidity, that's the word I'm looking for. That's how I'm going to get the fluidity to go from one position to the next. Okay? Now, like I said, you don't need to work this up to any speed. If you were a violin player or cello player or something like that, they usually have to work that up fairly quickly. But as guitar players, we don't usually have to. So you do want to be able to keep it in time, and you want to name the notes as you go. So we want to be 1, 2, 3, 4, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. All right? Very simple. So now, I mean, that's taken us up to the 13th fret. And now we know 8 notes along the B string. That's pretty good. Now we're going to take this around. We're going to go to the E string now, 3rd fret. This is G. Now the pattern I'm going to be following here is what we call the circle of fifths. And that's too much to get into for the scope of this video. I will talk about that in another video. But what's really cool about this is that we're going to carry over all of the letter names from the C major scale except for the second to last note, which in the case of G is going to be an F. We're going to raise that to F sharp. Okay, now if you've heard the term sharps and flats and you don't really know what's going on, a sharp is a note, we use a sharp, to raise a note a half step. And I'll show you why this is important. So right here, E string, 3rd fret, this is G. if I just carry up the notes and I follow the formula, right? Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. The notes that I get are going to be G, A, B, C, D, E. Now, E and F, I don't know if you noticed this, but E and F on the C major scale were a half step apart. They're still a half step apart in the G scale. So is B and C. So, in essence, all of your letter names in our musical system are a whole step apart, except B and C and E and F. So, if I were to play that scale without altering the F, it's going to sound like this. Okay, what we have there is the Mixolydian mode. Again, something else that we'll get into later on. But that's G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And what we need to do, it doesn't even fit the formula. We've got the half step in the wrong place. It's got to be between the last two notes. So we're going to take this F and we're going to raise it to F sharp. This allows us to keep all of the notes of the scale in alphabetical order while still getting the formula correct. So we've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Okay? Now, if you are familiar with flats, which do the opposite of sharps, they lower a note a half a step. You might ask, well, why don't we call this note G flat instead of G sharp? Or excuse me, G flat instead of F sharp. And that's because, like I said, we want to keep all of the notes in alphabetical order. Does it sound easier to remember to say E, F sharp, G, or E, G flat, G? Right? See, to me, the first is a little easier. E, F sharp, G. That means you're using all of the same letter names for all of the notes in the scale. So if we go through that again, that's going to be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. With me so far? Cool. Let's move on. We're going to go back to the B string at the 3rd fret. This is D. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the letter names that we pulled from the G major scale. This includes the F sharp. So we've got D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. And now we have to raise that second to last note. Notice I'm coming up to that B, C thing again, which are only a half step away. I've got to take that C and raise it to C sharp. So again, the whole scale sounds like this. This is D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Okay, same formula, same frets, different scale, and most of the notes carry over from G major. Now, because the B string is tuned differently than all of the rest of the strings, we've got to make a little bit of a compensation here. We're going to go down to the G string at the 2nd fret, and this is A. So we're going to carry over all of the notes from the D major scale, including the F sharp and the C sharp, and we're going to change the second to last note of the A major scale from what would be G to G sharp. Watch this. We've got A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. Okay. Now, again, this is just something that we need to memorize. Okay. It's very simple stuff in the grand scheme of things. We just need to take the time to memorize it. And I find by breaking it down into these scales, that's easy to do. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And if we're also looking down at the frets while we're playing for the time being, we can see where those notes are. We can see that A is here at the 2nd fret on the G string. It's also up here on the 14th fret of the G string, okay? That relationship is kind of important. Okay, pretty cool too. From here on out, for the rest of these scales that I'm going to demonstrate today, we're going to stay at the 2nd fret. So if we go down to the D string 2nd fret, that's E. Once again, carry over all of the notes from the A scale, and we're going to alter the second to last note. Looks like this. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. Okay? Pull that down, 2nd fret of the A string. This is B. We've got B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp. Now this is a weird one. A sharp, B. Now again, technically, we don't like seeing certain accidentals like A sharp. A lot of times if you play jazz and things like that, you'd want to see that as a B flat. But again, that pulls the notes out of alphabetical order and makes the scale harder to memorize. So even though it's a weird one, A sharp, we don't see that a whole lot, especially as guitar players, it's easier to remember in the long run. So that's why it's presented the way it is. So we go to the second fret on the E string, on the low, I'm on the low E string, second fret, this is F sharp. I'm going to take all those notes in addition to that wacky A sharp, we're going to have another weird note, but this is F sharp. So we got F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp. Now here's the really weird one, E sharp, F sharp. Now when we looked at the other scales, the E to F, that's a half step apart, right? So if you were looking at that on the piano, that'd be two white keys together with no black key in between them. So E to F. So why are we calling that F sharp? It's not actually a sharp. Well, again, it keeps everything in alphabetical order. That's what we call an enharmonic equivalent. Those are two notes that sound the same but are spelled differently. So if you were just listening to a piece of music, you can't really tell the difference between an E sharp and an F. It's the same pitch, all right? We label it a little differently because context is super important in music. So again, those notes are going to be F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp. Now, since the low E string and the high E string are identical, we're going to pull that all the way up, second fret, high E string, and do the exact same scale. The notes are going to be identical. You get two for the price of one. F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp. Okay, simple enough. And the last one we're going to cover today, we're going to go back down to the B string. We're at the second fret. So now we're one fret. We're a half step away from where we started, and we're halfway through the circle of fifths. This is C sharp. We're going to take all of the notes from F sharp that we collected, including that E sharp, and we're going to add one more sharp. Now at this point, every single note of the scale is going to be sharp. So it's actually kind of easy to remember. C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp. And just like the E sharp, B sharp is the same thing. If you look at B and C on the piano, it's two white keys right next to each other with no black key in between them. And so we call that, this C right here, we're calling B sharp in order to keep everything in alphabetical order. So C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, and C sharp. Here's the wacky part. There are three of the previous major scales that can be perceived as flat keys as well. Okay, so the B major scale that we covered in the last video can also be perceived as C flat. The F sharp major scale can be G flat, and the C sharp scale can be D flat. Now, a flat, as I stated in the last video, lowers a note a half a step. So while a sharp raises a note a half a step, the flat lowers a note a half a step. Now the same formula is about raising the second to last note of the scale is going to hold true, but we're going to introduce a new accidental called the natural sign. And what that does is it cancels a flat or a sharp. And that's how we're going to raise the flat notes to natural notes. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's probably a little confusing right now, but we'll see it in action. So come to the A string, second fret. This is B. Now when we did this scale in the last video, it was B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. Okay? But since B is a half step below C, we can conceive that scale as, or we can rename that scale as C flat. And just like the C sharp scale, every note is going to be flat. So it's going to be C flat, D flat, E flat, F flat, which is kind of a weird one, G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat. All right? Now, we're going to continue down to the second fret of the low E string. Okay? And this was F sharp. And what we're going to do now is we're going to rename that G flat. So we've got G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat. Now what we're going to do, since we don't have a sharp, to finish the formula, we're going to remove the flat and call it F natural to G flat. Okay, so we took all of the notes from the C flat major scale, and remember they were all flat, and we're taking that F at the end, we're taking what was an F flat in the C flat scale, and we're using a natural, we're canceling the flat, and we're turning that into F natural again. So one more time, we've got G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F natural, G flat. And since the low E string and the high E string are identical, except for the fact that they are in different octaves, we just transfer the whole thing up. So G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F, G flat. Okay? Now we continue along. We're going to bring this down to the second fret of the B string, and this is D flat now. In the last video it was C sharp, but C sharp and D flat are the same thing. You can either raise C up a half step, call it C sharp, or lower D a half step and call it D flat. If that seems a little confusing right now, it's because it is. But the more you use it, the more you get used to it, and it really is not all that confusing, especially since you're not necessarily going to be bouncing back and forth between C sharp and D flat. You're going to pick one way of using the scale. All right, so we've got, in this case, we're going to call it D flat, D flat, E flat, F. Remember, we carried that over from the G flat scale. G flat, A flat, B flat, and now we're going to take what was C flat. We're going to use a natural, and we're going to raise that up a half step to C, and then we're back at D flat. Okay, so those notes are going to be D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, D flat. Okay? Now again, the B string is tuned a little differently on the guitar, so when we go to the G string, we're going to drop down to the first fret from the second fret. This is now A flat. Again, 5 notes away from D flat. We're following the circle of fifths. So we go D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat. Okay? So this is A flat. First fret, G string, A flat. A flat, B flat, C, which we carried over from the D flat scale. D flat, B flat, F, G natural, A flat. Okay, that was going to be a G flat in the D flat scale. It's now G natural to make A flat. We go down to the first fret of the D string, and we've got E flat now. Carry all the notes over from A flat. E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D natural now, E flat. Now we move to the first fret of the A string. We have B flat. B flat, C, D, right, as carried over from the last scale. E flat, F, G, A natural, B flat. So you see as we're going along, we keep taking away a flat. Okay, so that makes things a little easier. We go down to F, which is at the first fret of the low E string. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E natural, F. And once again, since whatever you can do on the low E string, you do on the high E string, same scale. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. And look where that brings us. If we carry that down to the B string, we are now back at the first fret, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. No sharps or flats. This is the key of C major. All right? So you see what happens is as you go along the circle of fifths, first, you add sharps. You keep adding one sharp at a time until eventually all of the notes are sharp. There are 3 keys in there that overlap. They can be called either a sharp key or a flat key, or a sharp scale or a flat scale. So like the C flat scale was also the B major, the B scale. All right, even though it doesn't have sharp in the name, it uses sharps to create the scale. And then as you continue around the circle of fifths, we keep taking one flat away until eventually all of the notes are natural again. All right, so I hope that makes a certain amount of sense, or at least I hope as you start to use it, it will make a little bit more sense. 3 notes per string. You're probably familiar with that major scale fingering, right? It's if I'm over here at the 8th fret, this is going to be the key of C. And we've got 8th fret, 10th, 12th, and then 8, 10, 12 again. And then we've got 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12. And then we've got to do what I typically refer to as the B string compensation, right? We got to move up one fret because of the way the B string is tuned compared to everything else. We've got 10, 12, 13, and then again 10, 12, 13, okay? Now, this, if you went through the previous video and you saw the flat keys, you'll know that we did the F major scale along both the low and high E strings, right? So if we review that scale, we've got F, G, A, B flat, C. And that's where we want to start, okay? Because as far as our keys are concerned, there's no sharps or flats in the key of C. So it makes it easy to grab onto when we're naming notes and the like. So we've got our C here at the 8th fret. Now, if we remember doing the C major scale on the B string originally, which was here at the 1st fret, we have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay? And we can take that entire formula and that combination of letters and apply that to this 3 notes per string fingering like this. We've got C, D, E, and then F, G, A, and then B, C. Okay? Now you might notice that I used a specific fingering. This is the one that I recommended in the previous videos. 1, 2, 4, and then change positions. 1, 2, 4, and then 1, 2. And this is why. We're keeping the same fingering in the 3 notes per string approach. 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. Okay? So look at this. We've only gotten from the E string to the D string, and we've already completed the scale. Now, that was something that when I was learning 3 notes per string scales, this was before I learned where the notes were on the neck, and I kind of skipped over a lot of stuff because I took lessons for a while, but then I started teaching myself some things. I gave up on those lessons, and I started working on my own thing. And so I skipped over a lot of stuff, like probably many of you, right? So when I learned 3 notes per string fingerings, I just learned it as this one block of scale, right? So it's this 6-string scale. Right? And that's not really how the scale works. It's actually just the first 7 notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then the whole thing starts all over again. So now we can continue up. These next frets are going to have the same names, the same letter names. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now you might also notice that at this point, we're on the B string. These are the last 3 notes of our linear scale fingering. Okay, that's going to be cool. So hang on to that for just a second. So here we are at C again. Now we've got D, E, F. Okay, and those are the notes for our scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay? And what is so cool about all of this kind of stuff is that now what we've done is we've taken our linear scale, the same fingering, same letter name, same everything, and we've just stacked it. We've compressed it into basically one position. Now in this case, I'm playing this an octave lower, right? But that's the same, those are the same notes. They're the same pitch classes, which is really cool. So now, not only do we know a majority of the notes on the B string, but we also know some notes crossing these 3 strings, which is pretty cool. Now, here's something else that's really neat. At least I think it's neat. It's cool, it's awesome. You can call it whatever the hell you want to call it. But what's really cool is that wherever that C is, you can follow that major scale formula, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, and move up and down along that string. And that gives you some new phrasing opportunities. So for example, I might be playing a melody. I'm just going to go up and down the scales. Well, let me show you what I'm talking about. I might be playing a melody that starts down here on the B string on this C. Right? So I'm not really playing anything, but check this out. I'm not playing anything special, I should say. It's not unique in any way. It's not even really a melody. I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what this means. So I can play this fingering. and I can move in and out of the 3 notes per string scale and the linear version of the scale on the B string. Now the cool thing is too, it's like if you're using, let's say you're using a pentatonic, maybe A minor pentatonic and C major. Those are related scales. Again, we'll talk about some of that later. You could be riffing on your 5th fret A minor pentatonic, and then walk up the C major scale or down the major scale and then into the pentatonic. You can move your way all the way around. And that opens up a lot of doors for your improvising. Now, I said there was a C here, right? So there's a C on the D string. This is at the 10th fret. Well, if I continue the scale up, I can do the same thing. I've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now, I run out of frets, but if you've got, a 24 fret guitar or something, you can get that C too. It also means I can go backwards. C, B, A, G, F, E to the open D string, and of course C is here at the 3rd fret on the A string. But that also means if C is on the 3rd fret on the A string, I can continue that scale up going this way as well. I can go C, D, E, F, G, A. Now if you notice the position that I'm in that 3 notes per string fingering for C that we introduced at the beginning of the video. Right? And the purpose of getting in and out of the scale like that and moving from the linear version to the 3 notes per string version is one of, excuse me, phrasing. Okay? I can do all kinds of cool slides and things like that to get from one note to the next if I'm using the linear version of the scale, but not as much if I'm using the 3 notes per string version of the scale. So basically, no matter where you are in the scale, you can get from the linear version to the 3 notes per string version. I'm going to give you one other little bonus tip on this too, is that no matter where you are, you can start a 3 notes per string fingering. All right, if you want to be able to add something really quick, there's nothing to say that you have to start it here. Once you've learned where all of the C's are, right? If you're playing in the key of C major, you learn where all the C's are. This fingering, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, is going to be the same no matter what. Right? The only difference, of course, is when you have to cross that B string, because we've got that B string compensation. See here, I've got to shift up 1 fret. Right, I got to shift up that 1 fret, but it's the same fingering, right? Which is very, very cool. Up here is the same thing. Down here. These are all C's that I'm starting on, and I can play the scale up and down 1 octave, which is a very cool way to go. Right, just kind of goofing off there, but you get the idea. Like, here it is. So it doesn't really matter where I am on the neck. Chances are awesome. There's a C that I can get to, and there's part of this fingering that I can use, which is great. So if you're confused by that, see, now what I would recommend doing, of course, is once you get kind of familiar with C, move on to the G, then the D, then the A, then the E, right? Following that circle of fifths like we talked about in the first 2 videos, and start mapping it all out. They're all going to start on the low E string, right? And by now, if you have gone through the first 2 videos, you should know what all of the names of the notes are on the low E string. So you can start working that out in this fashion along the neck, laterally along the neck. We went linearly, now we're going laterally along the neck. So you can work that all out too and get very familiar with them. And if this is at all confusing, there's 2 things that I would say. I would say, number 1, pick one key to start with. Okay, whatever key you the majority of the songs you know, whatever key that is, start with that, okay? If you have a hard time figuring out what key that is, chances are really good, although it's not an absolute thing, but a lot of times, whatever the first chord of the song is, that's the key you're in, okay? Like I said, not absolute, but it happens a lot. Excuse me. So if the first chord in your song is G, chances are awesome you're in the key of G. So you use the G major scale. Learn that one. Learn the linear version up here, excuse me, which is going to be the same thing down here, right? And then learn the 3 notes per scale version. Okay? Naming the notes as you go. But, excuse me, naming the notes as you go. But pick one key and work on that and really start to memorize it, okay? Then you can play around with moving in and out of the linear version and in and out of the 3 notes per scale version and trying to combine them a little bit within the songs you know. The second thing that I would point out is this is going to sound a little weird, but don't try too hard to understand it just yet, okay? This is going to be whenever I've had students that have been, I've presented this kind of material to, the first thing is like, I don't get it. Trust me right now when I say that at this point, you don't need to get it. You need to memorize it, okay? When we're kids and we're learning how to talk, we learn how to talk before we learn anything about writing, before we learn anything about our alphabet, before we learn anything about spelling words. And we learn our alphabet usually through a song, right? We learn our ABC song. But at what point does your average 2-year-old look at the teacher and say, why is that called an A? Why does the B make that sound, right? We don't ask those questions. We don't think to ask those questions. We learn it first. We memorize it first. And then the more we see it in action and the more we learn, the more information we learn about it and how it works with the other concepts in music, that's when it all starts to make sense. That's when the understanding develops. But for right now, this stuff about the scales and the names of the notes within the scales simply needs to be memorized. You got to get it in your head. You got to get it under your fingers, okay? And don't worry too much. Like, I'm giving you all of the answers right now, okay? I'm telling you the names of the notes. I'm telling you what frets they're on. So you don't need to worry about getting it in that sense. Right now, you just have to learn it. You just have to memorize it. In future videos, we'll talk about, you know, the ins and outs and the whys and the hows and all of that kind of stuff. But right now, this is just building up just a consistent vocabulary, a common vocabulary between you and me so that we can continue to talk about scales, how those scales become chords, how those chords become progressions, those progressions become songs, etc., etc., etc. All right, so I hope that makes a little sense. So I hinted at a little bit of a problem with the 3 notes per string fingering, and today we're going to solve that problem, and that is there's a different fingering for the scale as you get from octave to octave, okay? So if I start the scale here, I've got the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, now you notice I started the scale with my first finger on the low E string, but I ended the scale again on C. Here's C, this is C. But now I'm on my second finger. So if I keep moving the scale up, I've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now that C is being played with my pinky. So every time I get to a new octave, I've got a different finger and therefore a different scale fingering. C, D, E, F. Now, if you listen to a good piano player run up and down scales, they can do it effortlessly, right? I mean, obviously it takes practice. Nobody's really, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people are born knowing how to run up and down the piano like that. But it's because of the way the piano is laid out. The piano is laid out linearly. And so it's got 88 keys, but there's really only 12 of them that you have to pay attention to. That's the only unique pattern is the first 12 keys. After that, it's just copy and paste all the way up the piano keyboard. And so as a piano player is rattling up those scales, they use the same fingering. As soon as they cross into the next octave, it's the same fingering. So they can get a lot of speed that way. Now, we've got a fingering here. I mean, the 3 notes per string fingering is a perfectly valid fingering. I use it all the time. But it's nice to have options, okay? So we can do something similar. It's not quite the same thing as on the piano, because of course on the guitar, we've actually got sort of 6 pianos kind of laid out. So like if you're looking at this from the standpoint of, say, white keys and black keys on the piano, every fret is a key on the piano, right? So if I'm going here, F is a white key on the piano. F sharp is a black key. G is a white key. G sharp is black. A is white. A sharp or B flat is a black key. Then I've got B is a white key. C is white, and so on and so forth, right? So you can kind of see. So every time I go up a fret, I'm going up 1 key on the piano. And so we've got 6 of these sort of pianos, but they're all shifted. It's not like it's the same notes across all the strings. Otherwise, how would we play chords? So what we can do here is we can play our first octave, but instead of using your second finger, shift positions 1 fret. So you go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now you're in a position to actually use the exact same fingering. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. All right, so now you've got a fingering that will work, that will get you across. It works diagonally across the neck now. But no matter where you start that C note, I could do it here on the A string. Ooh. Right, I can do it there, and it does the same thing. All I'm doing is I'm shifting up 1 position. So from this position, I've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B. This is 4th fret on the G string, and I shift that up to the 5th fret. This is C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Right, so that's a very cool thing, because no matter where you are on the neck, if you know where the 1 C is, as soon as you get to the next C, you can use that same fingering, and that makes things pretty simple. You can get to you can create some cool patterns with it. Right? And it's very easy to shift from 1 octave to the next because you're only using 1 fingering. You're recycling that fingering. Fewer things to think about, easier to get from 1 octave to the next and add a little drama to your solos, okay? Now, if this sounds at all familiar, maybe it doesn't sound familiar at all, you might have heard players like Paul Gilbert talk about this kind of technique from time to time, but he's definitely not the first person to use it. You might think of Yngwie, right? Again, I'm just mentioning some hard rock, some heavy metal players, but it actually goes back even further than that to a guy named Andreas Segovia, who really brought the guitar, in this case classical guitar, to the forefront. He really developed a lot for the technique and really brought it forward. He brought a lot of attention to the guitar as an instrument. So you might have heard the term Segovia scales. And this is essentially what he does. Although, if I remember correctly, and it's been a long time since I've looked him up, he tends to lead more with the pinky, or I should say he did. I believe he died in the 1980s, but somebody can check me on that. He tended to lead more with the pinky and then continue the scale up. And so I'm leading with the first finger, but everybody's got especially in hard rock, if they've discovered this technique, then they've kind of come up with their own way of doing it. And you can see what works more comfortably for you. But the idea really is just take the fingering from that 1 position and then move it to the next position, move it to the next octave, so you don't have to think about the next fingering at all. And it may make absolutely no difference whatsoever in the course of a sequence, right? Speaking of Paul Gilbert, a lot of his 6s sequences, it doesn't make any difference really which octave you're in. He just kind of blazes all the way through it, and if you're playing the scales the way he does, you're playing those sequences like him, then this isn't going to be a stumbling block. But it is important to know when you cross those octaves. When are you playing that C? Like if you're playing over a C chord, then it's really important to know where that C is and how that lines up. It's going to have an effect on your improvisation. So right now, just focus on really learning the major scale, learning it linearly, learning it laterally, and learning it diagonally. And you're going to start to see some really cool patterns pop up so that when you are playing a song in the key of C, bam, the notes just kind of, the frets that you need just kind of glow, right? You know where to put your fingers because you've done the work to memorize those positions, all right? So that's the thing. I hope you found that helpful. Now, before you go, remember to get your free PDF on how to sit with the guitar. I promise it will change the way you play. Thanks so much for watching. Now go practice, and I'll see you in the next video.